We all know buildings skip room 13, but what if it's not superstition? I was the maintenance supervisor at a nursing home for 6 years, and one day I discovered a hidden door. Behind it was room 13, and what I found inside changed everything I thought I knew about aging and immortality. I'm David Park, and I was a maintenance supervisor at Sunset Manor Nursing Home for 6 years. What I discovered in room 13 during a routine repair call made me realize that some secrets are buried so deep that they literally reshape the buildings that contain them. Sunset Manor was built in 1992, a modern facility designed to house 120 elderly residents across 3 floors. I'd worked there since 2017, and I knew every inch of that building, every pipe, every electrical panel, every room number and layout. That's why I was so confused when Mrs. Patterson, the head administrator, called me to her office on November 3, 2023. "David, we need you to check the heating system in room 13, she said, not making eye contact as she spoke. Some of the residents have been complaining about cold drafts coming from that direction. I stared at her, thinking she'd made a mistake. "Mrs. Patterson, there is no room 13. We go from room 12 to room 14 on the first floor. Room 13 was omitted from the original design for superstitious reasons." She finally looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes that made me uncomfortable, a mixture of fear and resignation. "David, I need you to check behind the maintenance closet next to room 12. There's a door back there that leads to additional space. The heating complaints are coming from residents in rooms 12 and 14, and we think the problem might be in that area." I'd been in that maintenance closet hundreds of times. It contained water heaters, electrical panels, and cleaning supplies. There was no door leading to additional space. "Mrs. Patterson, I think there might be some confusion. Just check the closet, David. Look more carefully this time. You'll find what you need to find." Her tone made it clear the conversation was over, but as I left her office, I heard her make a phone call. "It's time," she said to whoever was on the other end. "We can't wait any longer. He'll have to know." That afternoon, I went to the maintenance closet with a growing sense of unease. I'd been in this space countless times, but as I examined the back wall more carefully, I noticed something I'd somehow never seen before. The wall was slightly off. The measurements didn't match the building's blueprints. There should have been about 8 feet more space extending toward the exterior wall, but this back wall cut the room short. I pressed against the wall and felt it give slightly. It wasn't a solid wall, it was a false barrier, designed to look permanent but actually movable. Using my crowbar, I pried at the edges until I found a hidden catch. The entire wall section swung inward on concealed hinges, revealing a doorway that had been sealed for over 30 years. Beyond the doorway was room 13. The room was exactly the same size and layout as the other resident rooms, complete with a hospital bed, nightstand, small bathroom, and window. But everything in the room looked exactly as it had been left in 1992, outdated medical equipment, old-style linens, even newspapers dated from the facility's opening year. More disturbing, the room clearly had been occupied recently. The bed was unmade, personal belongings were scattered on the nightstand, and there were signs that someone had been living there. On the nightstand, I found a resident file that made my blood run cold. The name on the file was Patient 13 Classification, Permanent Isolation. Inside were medical records, psychological evaluations, and administrative notes dating back to the facility's opening. But the most disturbing element was the resident photograph. It showed a woman who appeared to be in her 50s, with wild gray hair and eyes that held a mixture of intelligence and madness. According to her file, her name was Dr. Helen Morrison, and she had been a resident of Sunset Manor since the day it opened. But that was impossible. If she'd been 50 years old in 1992, she'd be over 80 now. The woman in recent photographs looked exactly the same age as she had 30 years earlier. I continued reading the file, and what I discovered made me understand why room 13 had been hidden. Dr. Morrison had been a psychiatrist at Willowbrook Psychiatric Hospital before it closed in 1987. She'd been conducting illegal experiments on elderly patients, trying to find ways to halt or reverse the aging process. Her research had involved isolating patients, depriving them of human contact, and subjecting them to various chemical and psychological treatments. When Willowbrook was shut down, Dr. Morrison had suffered what appeared to be a complete psychological breakdown. She'd been found in her laboratory, aged decades beyond her chronological years but mentally trapped in delusions about her research. The state had been faced with a dilemma. Dr. Morrison couldn't be prosecuted because she was clearly mentally incompetent, but she was too dangerous to be housed with other patients. She required permanent psychiatric care, but no facility wanted to take responsibility for someone with her history. So they made a deal with Sunset Manor. In exchange for generous ongoing funding, the facility would house Dr. Morrison in complete isolation, hidden from public knowledge, family visits, or legal scrutiny. Room 13 was built as a secret addition, accessible only through the maintenance area, designed to keep her existence completely hidden. According to the file, Dr. Morrison believed she had discovered the secret to stopping aging, but the treatment required complete isolation from human contact. She'd convinced herself that social interaction was what caused cellular deterioration, and that by removing all human connection, she could achieve immortality. The staff who knew about her were sworn to secrecy and well compensated for their silence. Food was delivered through a slot in the door. Medical care was provided by a single doctor who visited monthly. Dr. Morrison had no visitors, no outside contact, no acknowledgement that she existed. But the most disturbing part of the file was the recent medical reports. According to examinations from the past few years, Dr. Morrison hadn't aged at all since 1992. Her cellular structure, cognitive function, and physical appearance had remained completely static for over 30 years. She had somehow achieved the immortality she'd been seeking, but at the cost of complete human isolation. As I read through the psychological evaluations, I realized that Dr. Morrison's condition had deteriorated far beyond simple dementia or schizophrenia. 30 years of total isolation had created something that wasn't entirely human anymore. She spent her days talking to imaginary patients from her old hospital, conducting elaborate experiments on invisible subjects, and maintaining detailed research notes about her discoveries. She believed that the other residents of Sunset Manor were test subjects in her ongoing studies, and she tracked their aging patterns through some supernatural awareness of their conditions. The file contained transcripts of her daily monologues, recorded through hidden microphones. Subject 47 in room 47 is showing accelerated cellular degeneration. The social interaction is killing her. If I could isolate her properly, I could save her. They don't understand that human connection is poison to the elderly. It's what makes them deteriorate so rapidly. The staff members are contaminating my subjects. Every time they touch the residents, speak to them, show them affection, they're introducing aging agents. I need to find a way to eliminate all human contact from this facility. My isolation chamber has proven the theory correct. 31 years without human touch, without meaningful conversation, without emotional connection. I remain exactly as I was when the experiment began. But I'm so lonely. The loneliness is becoming physical pain. The most recent entries were the most disturbing. I can hear them through the walls. The residents in rooms 12 and 14. They're aging so quickly because they're too close to my isolation field. I need to expand the experiment. If I could isolate all the residents properly, I could save them from the curse of human connection. The maintenance man will find me soon. I can sense his presence in the building, his growing awareness of room 13. When he opens the door, I'll finally have a new subject for my research. Someone younger, stronger, who can help me expand the isolation protocols to the entire facility. I dropped the file as the implications hit me. Dr. Morrison had been aware of my existence, tracking my movements through the building, anticipating this moment when I would discover her room. That's when I heard the voice behind me. "You found me, David." I turned around to see Dr. Morrison standing in the bathroom doorway. She looked exactly as she had in her 1992 photograph, middle-aged, gray-haired, but with eyes that held 30 years of accumulated madness. "You've been reading about my research," she said, moving closer with movements that seemed too smooth, too controlled. "Do you understand the breakthrough I've achieved?" "You've been isolated for 30 years, I said, backing toward the hidden door. "You need medical attention, psychological help." "I need nothing," she replied. "I've transcended the human condition. I've discovered that aging, death, deterioration, they're all caused by human connection. Every conversation, every touch, every moment of emotional engagement introduces entropy into our cellular structure. That's not how aging works. That's not how science works. Conventional science failed me," Dr. Morrison said. "But isolation science, deprivation science, that's where the real discoveries lie. Would you like to see my laboratory?" She gestured toward the bathroom, and I realized it wasn't really a bathroom. Behind the bathroom fixtures was another hidden doorway leading to a much larger space. "I've been expanding room 13 over the years," she explained. "Tunneling through the walls, creating additional chambers. I now have a complete research facility hidden within this building. Labs, isolation chambers, observation rooms. A whole parallel facility that exists in the spaces between the official rooms." "How?" "The building is only 3 stories. There's no room for what you're describing. Space is more flexible than you think, David. When you remove yourself from human perception, from social reality, physical reality becomes much more malleable. I exist in the gaps between what people notice, in the spaces they ignore." She led me through the hidden doorway into a maze of interconnected rooms that shouldn't have been able to exist within the building's footprint. Laboratories filled with equipment I didn't recognize, isolation chambers with viewing windows, and rooms containing what appeared to be research subjects. But the subjects weren't human. They were something else, figures that had once been human but had been changed by prolonged isolation into something alien and wrong. "These are my successful cases," Dr. Morrison explained proudly. "Staff members who've helped me over the years, residents who volunteered for the isolation protocol. They've all achieved immortality, just like me." The figures turned to look at me, and I saw that their eyes held the same impossible emptiness as Dr. Morrison's. They'd been isolated so completely, for so long, that they'd lost their humanity entirely. "We want to expand the program," one of them said in a voice that sounded like it came from the bottom of a well. Isolate all the residents, all the staff. Save them from the contamination of human connection. The loneliness is the only pure state, another added. Everything else is corruption. Dr. Morrison smiled. We've been preparing for this moment, David. You're going to help us implement the isolation protocol throughout the entire facility. Starting with the residents who are closest to room 13, they're already being affected by our proximity. I understood now why Mrs. Patterson had looked so afraid when she sent me to find room 13. She'd known this day would come, known that Dr. Morrison's influence was spreading beyond her hidden room. The residents in rooms 12 and 14, I said. They're getting sick because you're affecting them somehow. They're being purified, Dr. Morrison corrected. The isolation field I've created is beginning to protect them from human contamination. Soon, they'll be ready for complete isolation, just like us. I looked around at the impossible laboratory, at the former humans who'd been transformed by decades of complete isolation, at Dr. Morrison herself, still looking 50 years old after 30 years of hidden existence. I won't help you, I said. You don't have a choice, Dr. Morrison replied. You've seen too much, learned too much. You can either join us willingly, or we'll implement the isolation protocol on you by force. But either way, you're not leaving room 13. The other figures began moving closer, and I realized they intended to trap me in one of the isolation chambers. I ran for the hidden door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. The building responds to our will now, Dr. Morrison said. 30 years of isolation has given us authority over this space. You're in our domain now, David. I was trapped in an impossible maze of hidden rooms with creatures that had once been human but had sacrificed their humanity for immortality. The facility I'd worked in for 6 years contained a secret world of isolation and madness that defied every law of physics and psychology I understood. But I remembered something from Dr. Morrison's file. Her greatest fear wasn't aging or death. It was loneliness. The isolation that had given her immortality had also driven her completely insane. You're so lonely, I said to her. 30 years without a real conversation, without human touch, without connection. The immortality isn't worth it, is it? For just a moment, her composed mask slipped, and I saw the profound suffering in her eyes. The loneliness is significant, she admitted. But it's the price of transcendence. Human connection is poison, but it's also addictive. Breaking that addiction requires sacrifice. But you haven't broken it, I said. You're still desperate for connection. That's why you've been watching me, tracking my movements. You need human contact so badly that you've created an entire plan just to force me to stay with you. The other figures began making distressed noises, as if my words were causing them physical pain. Connection is contamination, they chanted in unison. Isolation is purification. But I could see that Dr. Morrison was wavering. 30 years of complete isolation had preserved her body but destroyed her mind, and deep down, she knew it. Let me tell you about the residents, I said. About Mrs. Chin in room 12, who lights up every time her granddaughter visits. About Mr. Rodriguez in room 14, who still holds hands with his wife after 60 years of marriage. About all the people in this facility who choose connection over loneliness, even knowing that connection means aging and eventually dying. Stop, Dr. Morrison whispered, but I could see tears forming in her eyes. They're happy, I continued. Even with dementia, even with failing bodies, even facing death, they're happier than you are. Because they chose love over fear, connection over isolation, humanity over immortality. The hidden laboratory began to shake, as if the building itself was responding to Dr. Morrison's emotional breakdown. "I can't go back," she said. "I can't age. I can't die. I can't rejoin the human race. I'm trapped in this immortal isolation forever." "But you don't have to trap anyone else," I said. "You can let me go. You can stop trying to isolate the other residents. You can choose to be alone without forcing your loneliness on others." Dr. Morrison stared at me for a long moment, and I saw her make a decision that cost her everything. "Go," she whispered. The hidden door swung open, and I ran through the maze of impossible rooms back to the maintenance closet. Behind me, I could hear the laboratory collapsing, the hidden chambers folding back into whatever space they'd been carved from. I sealed the false wall behind me and immediately called Mrs. Patterson. "It's done," I told her. "But we need to relocate the residents in rooms 12 and 14 immediately, and seal off that maintenance closet permanently." "Is she?" "She's choosing isolation," I said. "Real isolation this time. No more attempts to expand the program." Mrs. Patterson arranged for the residents to be moved to different rooms, and I welded the maintenance closet shut, sealing the entrance to room 13 forever. But sometimes, late at night during my security rounds, I can hear sounds coming from behind that sealed door. Not the sounds of someone trying to escape, but the sounds of someone choosing to remain alone. Dr. Morrison achieved her goal of immortality through isolation, but she learned too late that some prices are too high to pay. She's still there, in room 13, in the spaces between spaces, immortal and alone. I quit my job at Sunset Manor the next week and moved across the country. I couldn't continue working in a building that contained such darkness, such twisted science hidden in impossible spaces. But the story doesn't end there. 3 months after I left, Mrs. Patterson called me with disturbing news. The residents who had been moved from rooms 12 and 14 were showing signs of rapid aging, much faster than normal, as if their bodies were trying to catch up on all the aging that had been prevented while they were near room 13. "It's like she was preserving them somehow," Mrs. Patterson explained. "And now that they're away from her influence, time is catching up with them all at once." Both residents died within a week of each other, their bodies failing as if they'd lived several extra years in just a few months. "There's something else, David," Mrs. Patterson continued. "We're getting reports from other staff members about sounds coming from the sealed maintenance closet. Not trying to escape, but teaching. Like she's giving lectures to an invisible classroom." I realized what was happening. Dr. Morrison wasn't just choosing isolation anymore, she was training others, sharing her research with spirits or entities that existed in the same impossible spaces she had created. Last month, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a research paper titled "The Morrison Protocol: Achieving Immortality Through Complete Human Isolation." The paper detailed step-by-step instructions for creating isolation chambers, the psychological techniques needed to break human connection addiction, and the scientific principles behind using loneliness as a preservation method. At the bottom of the paper was a handwritten note: "David, you understand the value of my work better than anyone. The protocol is ready for wider implementation. There are many facilities that could benefit from these discoveries. I hope you'll reconsider helping us expand the program. Room 13 is always available if you change your mind. Dr. H. Morrison." I burned the research paper immediately, but I kept the note as a reminder of what I'd encountered. Because I know that Dr. Morrison is still in there, still conducting her research, still finding ways to spread her twisted version of immortality to other nursing homes, other vulnerable elderly populations. And I know that somewhere, in facilities across the country, other Room 13s are being created. Other administrators are making deals with entities like Dr. Morrison, trading the humanity of their residents for funding and scientific advancement. The elderly are invisible in our society, warehoused and forgotten until they die. But Dr. Morrison has found a way to make them literally invisible, trapped in isolation chambers that exist in the spaces between normal reality, preserved forever but completely alone. If you have elderly relatives in nursing homes, pay attention to the room numbers. If there are gaps in the numbering, if certain areas seem colder than others, if residents complain about feeling watched or isolated, ask questions. Demand answers. Don't let your loved ones disappear into the spaces between spaces. Because immortality isn't always a gift. Sometimes, it's the cruelest punishment imaginable. And Dr. Morrison is still out there, still teaching others how to achieve it.